What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto became the forbidden lover of Konoha's Hokage and elders' wives? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. It was a bright sunny day, without a cloud in the sky and with a small breeze. Well, it had been such a day until about an hour ago, when it started to rain, and the small breeze became more like an hurricane. So, now, two travelers found themselves on the road, in the middle of nowhere, under the rain. They had left the last town in the morning, after their creditors began to be more and more insistent about being paid. To be honest, the fault was just of one of them. The younger dark-haired girl didn't do anything. Rather, it had been her blonde master who kept on gambling and losing everything they had and then more. Luckily they spotted an inn not too far down the road where the two of them could hopefully find a shelter. Hurrying towards it, they finally entered the building, fleeing from the fury of the elements outside. "Welcome to our inn, would you like to have a room?" It could be quite a while before it stops to rain. A young woman greeted them with a smile. "Yes, thank you. Shizune, can you bring our things there? I need to drink something." "Yes, Tsunade-sama." While the dark-haired girl, Shizune, went upstairs, the now-named Tsunade went to take a drink and talk with the woman who welcomed them. "So, does it rains often around here?" she asked. "Not really, only in this season. Usually the rest of the year the weather is as good as fire countries," the woman answered while offering Tsunade a saucer filled with sake. She was about to drink it when she heard a yell from up the stairs. "No, Tun-Tun." The blonde woman turned in time to see a little jacket-wearing pig run out of the door and into the storm, followed by Shizune. Cursing everything that came to her mind, she ran after them. Half an hour later they were still out in the woods, soaked from head to toe. "Damn that fucking pig," Tsunade yelled in frustration, showing her infamous short temper. "When I put my hands on her, I'm making her into sausages." "Tsunade-sama, here, come." Shizune called her mentor from some feet away. "What, have you found that little ingrate?" The blonde medic Nin reached her apprentice and saw that she was pointing at something. Looking in that direction she finally spotted Tun-Tun, but she wasn't alone. In fact she was currently laying in a small boy's lap. The child was sitting under a tree petting the pig quietly. He was also soaking wet, like he had been there from when it started to rain. His hair were a really dark golden color, almost orange, kept down by the water, hiding his eyes. He was so small that Tsunade estimated him to be around 2 years old, defiantly not an age at which he should be on his own in the forest, let alone during a storm. The blonde Sannin slowly approached him and knelt down in front of him. He didn't make any sign to have noticed and continued to pet Tun-Tun quietly. "Hello little one. My name's Tsunade and the dark-haired girl over there is Shizune. We were looking for this little pig, Tun-Tun. And you? What's your name? What are you doing out here?" She tried to speak quietly as to not scare him, but at the same time loud enough to be heard over the noise of the falling rain. The child raised his head and looked at her in the eyes. Tsunade's skills as a ninja were the only things that stopped her from falling back yelping in surprise. His eyes. They had black slitted pupils, slitted like her one-time teammate Orochimaru. And the iris was the most intense red she had ever seen, redder than even the Sharingan. All in all they were creepy, they seemed the eyes of a demon, but that idea clashed with the innocent and curious expression their owner had. Tsunade had been staring at him for a while when a thunder reminded her they were in the woods during a storm. Shaking her head she saw Tun-Tun going to Shizune, who took her in her arms and, acting on impulse, she picked up the child. "Come on, we can't stand out here all day." Going back to the inn didn't take much, but by the time they arrived it was already late and everyone had gone to rest. The two women, one pig and a child went to their room. Tsunade made her way straight to the bathroom and began to fill the bathtub with hot water before finally putting down the child she was carrying. Speaking of which, he was looking around curiously, but in a more controlled and quiet way than what one would expect from a 2-year-old. "Hey, kid," Tsunade called, "come here. You can't stay with your clothes wet like that, otherwise you'll catch a cold. What you need now is a nice hot bath. Trust me, I'm a medic, you know." The little boy just stared at her. And stared, without moving. Sighing, Tsunade knelt down in front of him. "Raise your arms." He did that and the blonde Sannin was able to take off his gray shirt, then she helped him removing his sandals and shorts. When they finished, Tsunade turned off the water and checked the temperature. Satisfied, she lifted the child and put him in the bathtub. See, it wasn't that hard, was it? He shook his head and Tsunade smiled at him. Good. Shizune, can you put his clothes somewhere they can dry? Sure thing Tsunade-sama. While the dark-haired girl was gathering the clothes on the floor, the little child managed to lay his hands on a sponge that had fallen in the bathtub and raised it over his head. He was studying it curiously when he tried to squeeze it, making some water fall on his head. He dropped it at once, sputtering and shaking his head with a confused and scared expression. Shizune ran in the other room with the clothes, trying to not burst out laughing with little success. Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle, even when he looked at her pouting. You had never seen a sponge before, had you? She asked, taking it with some soap. Now I'm going to show how it's used, okay? While Tsunade was washing him, she noticed that he didn't seem to have anything wrong, like scars or signs of being undernourished. He did have, however, what seemed to be 3 birthmarks on each cheek that looked like whiskers. When she finished, she let him have the sponge back and took the shampoo to wash his hair. They were really soft, even for a child, and she made a mental note that he seemed to utterly enjoy himself when she stroked them. In the end, the slug Sanin wrapped him up in a towel and carried him in the other room where she made him sit down on a bed. Unfortunately, this wasn't such a good idea. In fact, he began to jump to test exactly how soft it was. Shizune, seeing her sensei's left eye start to twitch, grabbed the little boy from his waist and made him sit down in her lap. That's when he looked her straight in the eyes for the first time. The dark-haired girl was taken aback for a second by his eyes, but her mentor's voice shook her out of her thoughts. All right, kid. Listen, for tonight it's better if you stay here, but tomorrow we'll bring you back to your home. Now, can you tell us exactly where it is? The child didn't answer and just stared at her for a while, tilting his head to the side. Then, slowly he shook his head. Shizune frowned and tried a different way. Maybe you can tell us your family name. There could be someone who know your parents. He turned his attention to the dark-haired girl and shook his head. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. How could he be so sure that no one knows his parents? Normally children his age thinks everyone knows their parents, like they're the greatest people to ever live. Unless, do you mean you don't live with your parents? Well, there must be someone who takes care of you. He shook his head again. Tsunade began to feel uncomfortable and tired, so she voiced the worst possibility she could think of. With her luck, it might actually be not really far from the truth. So what? Have you always lived alone in the forest? A nod. In the silence that followed, the two women shared the same thought at the revelation. Oh, crap. The blonde medic began to make hand seals and in less than a second was running a diagnostic jutsu on the little boy. God knows how many problems could that kind of life have caused him. To her amazement, however, she couldn't find anything out of place. Except from the sponge in his hands. Tsunade was stunned. She knew she had left that in the bathroom. How? When did you take that? It was ridiculous. She was a ninja, a damned Sanin at that, and she hadn't seen him grab it. He simply grinned at her with his eyes closed and scratching the back of his head with one hand, while the other clutched his sponge tightly to his chest. Shizune couldn't help but smile down at the child on her lap. It seems you're one little tricky guy, aren't you? He nodded vigorously before letting out a little yawn and rubbed his eyes in the cutest way either woman had ever seen. Enough talk for now, stated Tsunade. It's time to go to bed. We'll try to solve this mess tomorrow. Without waiting for a replay, the blonde woman picked the red-eyed boy and put him in the bed with her. She pulled the covers over the both of them and, just before falling asleep, she felt him nuzzle against her in search of warmth and security. It was the morning after Tsunade and Shizune's arrival in Whirlpool and the rain still hadn't stopped. The two women were currently talking about the sleeping child curled up on Tsunade's lap. Yes, I've already told you, I'm sure. I don't know how it is possible, but he's the healthiest child his age I've ever seen. It's nothing short of a miracle, the legendary medic said irritably. As for his eyes, I'm not sure, but even if it is a dujutsu, it hasn't awoken yet. There was a pause before Shizune decided to ask her mentor hesitantly, what do we do now? We can't leave him here like nothing happened, besides he's such a sweet little child. She trailed off looking at the blonde Sanin who stared back at her for a minute, then with a sigh she looked down at the young boy. Fine. We'll take him with us for now. She said the last two words glaring at a grinning Shizune, who left to get back the now dried clothes the child was wearing when they found him. It didn't matter what she said. She had seen the look in her sensei's eyes. It was clear she already cared for the little boy. Tsunade grumbled something about stupid students with an all-knowing attitude. Her rant, however, was cut short when she felt the child in her lap stir and let out a yawn. She watched him looking around a little disoriented before he looked up at her and grinned. She smiled back and ruffled his hair, which caused him to push his head against her hand. "I think it's time for breakfast, what do you say? Are you hungry?" The child nodded and made to go when Tsunade restrained him. He looked back at her, tilting his head to the side, in what she started to identify as a habit of his, while she herself raised an eyebrow at him. "You didn't think to go to have breakfast naked, did you?" He stared at her with a confused expression, like he wasn't able to understand the problem. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose. "What have I got myself into?" Luckily Shizune chose that moment to come back with his clothes. Then again, watching her help the little boy get dressed, Tsunade found herself wondering just how the hell he was wearing them in the first place, since it was clear he had no idea how to put them on. Some minutes later the three of them sat down at a table for the most important meal of the day. While Shizune took a slice of bread and began to spread something on it, Tsunade was trying to keep busy their little fellow. It's not like he was loud, on the contrary he was awfully quiet, but he definitely had a gift to grab things. She still had to come to terms with the fact that even now he somehow had that sponge in his hands. Really, what's the point in training ninja for years, when the first child you come across is able to steal anything from just under your nose? Sighing, Tsunade rummaged in her bag until she found something that could help her. It was a book her old teammate Jiraiya gave her not too long ago, the only not perverted one he had wrote so far, though, if he had said that before he actually gave her it, he would have avoided a rather painful beating. She remembered he was boasting about that Minato kid having become the fourth Hokage and how he liked this book. It felt kind of strange thinking about Jiraiya's student as the new Hokage who took their sensei's title, even if he was seen like a living legend. She shook her head to clear her mind, and almost had a mental breakdown when she realized that, while she was daydreaming, a certain child managed to take the book from her hands without her noticing. Yeah, years of ninja training are just a waste of time. That or he must have a freaking bloodline. She snatched the book from him. "Now, if you're a good boy, I'll read you a story, okay?" Shizune gave him a slice of bread that he ate while listening to Tsunade. And, since it was raining and they had nothing else to do, she continued to read all morning until they finished the book. "Well, I'll be damned," the Sannin said, closing the book. "It seems that stupid pervert of Jiraiya can actually write a good story when he wants to. What do you think, kid? Did you like it?" He nodded, smiling at her. "You know, we'll have to give you a name. I can't just keep on calling you, kid." Shizune looked at her. "Do you have something in mind?" "MHMH. Naruto, like the main character of the story. Besides, it means maelstrom and I think it's fitting in a way. It's also an ingredient of ramen. Isn't it a little too original?" Tsunade glared at her dark-haired student. "There's nothing wrong with it. The only other option is," she pointed at his sponge, SpongeBob. Shizune's sweat dropped. "Naruto then. What about a clan name? I know he doesn't have one, but I have already thought about that, but we'll have to wait for Jiraiya to show his face again. No way in hell I'm going back in that fucking village to sign the required papers." Shizune frowned. "Tsunade-sama. I don't think you should use that language when there's a small child around." "And what papers are you talking about?" The blonde woman huffed. "You're really too tense, Shizune, you should relax some more. There's a young man at the bar that had been staring at you for a couple of hours now, he's not bad looking. I suggest you to get laid, it can do wonders for." "Tsunade-sama." Shizune stood up abruptly with a really red face. She was embarrassed, murderous, and she simply couldn't believe her sensei had just said that, let alone in front of a 2-year-old child. "That's what I was referring to, way too tense. Can we please speak about something else? And where is Naruto-chan?" At her question, Tsunade poked the form of the little boy who was hiding in her jacket. "I think you scared him." It took another 3 days before the rain stopped and the 2 medics, 1 pig, and 1 child could finally leave the inn. Their stay was rather uneventful after Shizune made clear she wasn't interested in bed activities, and made a not-so-subtle threat of castration to the braver men who approached her with that intention. Unfortunately, while she was dealing with that issue, Tsunade was free to introduce Naruto with the game of poker. The little bastard learned unbelievably fast and seemed that he had an even more unbelievable luck. Tsunade thought that he was somehow stealing her fair share of good luck. On the other hand, Shizune, although distraught at him learning to gamble, seemed to find it very funny. Anyway, after a little trip, they had arrived at a big village and were currently looking for a shop to buy some new clothes for Naruto. He was carried in Tsunade's arms and had slept with his head on her shoulder all the time since they left the inn. After wandering a little, they spotted what seemed to be a good one and went in. Once inside, they were greeted by a clerk who started to rant about every single thing he had. Tsunade, however, ignored him and put Naruto down on his feet, waking him. He rubbed his eyes and looked around curiously, but before he could go to explore, the blonde Sannin decided to try and explain him what they were there for. Naru-chan, listen, you and Shizune are going to pick up your new clothes. Choose what you like and don't steal anything, okay? If you're a good boy, I'll give you a gift. The red-eyed child nodded and let Shizune take his hand to guide him through the shelves, while Tsunade turned to face the clerk who had never stopped talking. The fact he was giving her his back while speaking about what would be fitting for such beautiful women did very little to put the Sannin in a good mood. Hey boy, stop your useless babbling for a second. Do you have goggles? Of course, the best you'll ever see. Here they are. Let me show you, these are. Yeah, I know. Tsunade looked at them while trying her best to not punch that babbling moron through the wall. She had noticed that people who had made eye contact with Naruto backed away in fear and surprise, and, as stupid as it was, she knew that many others would be scared of him because of his red slitted eyes. Which brought her to look for goggles. Suddenly she saw what she needed. They were similar to the ones that Uchiha brat, Obito, one of Minato's students, used to wear, but black, so that the eyes were hidden from view. She picked them up, wondering about the young blonde Hokage. She remembered him as a talented and bright kid, if a bit idealistic. Didn't he realize that taking that title was like going around wearing a bull's eye? Then again, that began when he developed the Hirishin. And I too had been marked when I became a Sannin, she thought with a frown. I'll have to make sure Naru-chan can defend himself, just in case someone who doesn't know better thinks to make a name for himself challenging me. She was brought out of her thoughts when someone pulled her jacket. Looking down, Tsunade saw Naruto wearing a pair of black shorts and a bright red t-shirt. She grinned at him. You look good, Naru-chan. But have you been good as well? The child looked toward Shizune, tilting his head to the side, and, when she nodded with a smile, he turned to Tsunade expectantly. She chuckled lightly and handed him his new goggles. He didn't waste time and put them on, before looking around to test how he saw things with them on. He then pulled them some distance away, to see how elastic was the band that held them in place. However, before either woman could warn him, he let go of them and they went back, hitting him with enough force to make him fall on his butt. Shizune stifled a laugh, while Tsunade chuckled, shaking her head. The blonde then knelt down and helped him on his feet. Are you hurt? Naruto didn't answer and just pouted, half angry that they found it funny, and half embarrassed. Tsunade took off his goggles and kissed his eyes before putting them back in place. Better? She asked, ruffling his hair. He nodded, shuffling his feet and looking to the side while biting his lower lip. The blonde Sannin raised an eyebrow at his strange behavior. What's the matter? Do you want a hug? She couldn't help but smile when he nodded again, and pulled him in a bone-crushing one. Later that night, Tsunade instructed Shizune to spread word that she needed to meet her old teammate Jiraiya. The dark-haired girl asked her if it was for the papers she spoke about, but the only answer she got was a comment about how a lovely couple she would make with another chatter like that babbling clerk. It was obvious that she'll have to wait to have an answer. So, what can you say me about him? Not much. He seems to have joined a group, you know, one in which they all wear the same thing. You can't mistake, just look for someone with a long black cloak with red clouds and a rain. The first man who spoke, a tall guy with long white hair, nodded before asking, do you know the name of this group? No, just that they're not someone to mess with. It doesn't matter, thanks. The white-haired man stood up, leaving some money on the table of the bar for both the drinks and the information. The place was a dark one, not somewhere people would spend their money or time if they could avoid it, but also where, buying a drink for someone, you can have loads of info. The tall man knew this quite well, and in the last years had made sure to make as many friends as he could out of the people who frequented those places. The result was that now he had one of the best spy network of all the elemental countries. He turned and was about to leave when the other man remembered something. You know, I've also heard something about your other teammate, and it isn't about her gambling. This was new. As far as he remembered, she hadn't done anything else since she decided to leave the village. He just hoped it wasn't something dangerous for the leaf. What did you heard? Well, it seems you're not just a loud mouth with women after all. Rumor is that she wants to see you. He blinked. This wasn't new, this was surreal. Where? Tsunade eyed her cards carefully. 2 sevens, a 9, a queen, and a king. She kept the sevens and changed the other 3. Another 7, a 8 and a 10. She glanced at the other player. What do you have this time? She wondered. She showed her cards with a smirk. So, what do you say, Gaki? Naruto was looking at her cards while trying not to drop his, which wasn't an easy task given how big they were compared to his hands. Finally he shuddered and showed his cards. An ace, a second ace, a third ace, a king, and another ace. What the hell? How did you manage to do that? Tsunade-sama, Shizune said sternly coming from the kitchen. It's bad enough that you taught him to play poker, at least don't swear in front of him. But look at his cards. He must have a bloodline to do that. And it's the 3rd time in 5 hands. Well, he's just very lucky. And I think he's very tired too right now, aren't you, Naru-chan? He answered, yawning loudly and rubbing his eyes. After all, he was just a 2-year-old child, and he needed some sleep in the afternoon. It was amazing how he was so curious and sneaking at times and extremely lazy on others. Shizune picked him up and brought him in his bed. He rolled over and reached for his sponge that was on his bedside table. The only other thing on it were the dark goggles Tsunade gave him almost a month ago. Naruto always wore them unless he was sure that there were just the 3 of them around. Shizune went back in the living room of the house they were currently living in. Tsunade had said that, if they were waiting for Jiraiya to show up, they should rent a place to stay because it could be a while before he came. He's sleeping. Tsunade-sama, when do you think Jiraiya-sama will show up? The blonde Sanin gave her a calculating look. Anytime now. It's been a month and he should know I'm waiting by now, and I'm confident he remembers I don't like waiting, especially him. Why do you ask? Is something troubling you? The dark-haired girl shook her head. No, on the contrary, I'm kind of happy we're staying in the same place for more than a week. Maybe it can help him. Tsunade sighed, still worried that he hasn't spoken yet. Don't worry, it's probably because he didn't have anyone to teach him, just give him some time. Shizune opened her mouth to say something, but a knock at the door stopped her. Tsunade turned towards the door and yelled, "Who's there?" "Tsunade, it's me, Jiraiya. I've heard you really missed me and wanted to see me. Can I come in?" Somehow the 2 women could feel his perverted grin. Tsunade's eye was twitching, and as soon as she opened the door she punched Jiraiya in the face. "Ah, what was that for? Don't try that, you know very well what was for, and if you as much as try to make it sound like that. Okay, no need to beat me. Geez, and I even put a stop to my researches to come here." Tsunade narrowed her eyes but didn't say anything. Instead she motioned him to go inside and take a seat at the table. "Ah, Shizune, long time no see," the toad Sanin greeted her. "Jiraiya-sama," she answered, bowing her head. They all seated around the table while Tsunade took out some sake and poured some for Jiraiya and herself. Shizune looked at them disappointed. Isn't it a little too early to begin drinking? Come on, it's just 2 old teammates celebrating their reunion. Really, Tsunade, your apprentice is too tense for her own good. She needs some free time to relieve all that stress. At that the blonde Sanin chalked on her sake and started to laugh, while her apprentice stood with a red face and went out slamming the door. Jiraiya looked at the door before turning to his old teammate. "What did I say?" "Nothing, never mind," she answered, chuckling. It really was funny seeing Shizune so embarrassed. Normally she was the serious and composed one, and there was a strange sense of satisfaction in making her flustered like that. Naruto had just fallen asleep when he heard a shout from the other room. It seemed that someone had come to see his. He really didn't know what the 2 kind ladies were for him. He just liked how they both took care of him, especially Tsunade. She often played with him, caressed his hair, gave him tender looks, and she even sang him a lullaby once. It gave him a strange feeling, like warmth and peace, and he found himself longing for it. Suddenly he was brought out of his thoughts by someone slamming the door quite loudly. Deciding to know what was going on, he put on his goggles and left his sponge in their place. He loved it. You can squeeze it all day and it will always come back the same. He silently made his way to the door and slipped in the other room. He saw a white-haired man talking and drinking with Tsunade, Apparently it was Shizune who had left earlier. He was studying the unknown man when Tsunade noticed him and called him with a smile, "Naruto, what's up? Did we wake you?" Jiraiya turned to look who she was talking to and nearly fell from his seat. He continued to stare wide-eyed at the child while he went to seat on Tsunade's lap, nodding in response at her question. "Naru-chan," this man with his mouth opened and the stupid expression, is my old friend Jiraiya. We were in the same ninja team as kids. "Pervert, this is Naruto, and I would close my mouth if I were you. You're going to eat a fly if you stay like that any longer." Said pervert didn't seem to have heard a word however, and looked at the blonde medic with the most stunned face she had ever seen. "BBBU, but how, when, who?" He tried to calm down, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I didn't know you had a child. How did it happen? When? Who's the father? Wait, did you call him Naruto? Like the hero in my book? Does it mean I'm his godfather? I'll just pretend I didn't hear you asking about my supposed making a baby thing. We found him about a month ago in the woods. He doesn't have family, so we decided to bring him with us. However, yes, I named him after your book, so you can be his godfather if you want." Jiraiya grinned happily. "Do you plan to train him as a ninja? I can help with that. After all, I was the sensei of the current Hokage." "Exactly when do you plan to stop repeating that every 2 minutes? Anyway, let's get down to business. I want you to bring me some documents from Konoha." Jiraiya stood up at attention at that. He knew why she didn't want to go there herself, but he couldn't imagine what documents she was talking about. "I want you to bring me an adoption form." The toad Sanin stared at her with wide eyes. It took 5 whole minutes for the shock to subside, and when it did he sighed. He knew she'll probably kill him for what he's going to say, but he had to. "I don't think it's a good idea. What do you?" "Listen, Tsunade, I'm not saying not to adopt him, on the contrary, and I'm really happy for you, but you'll put him in danger. Before coming here I was gathering info about Orochimaru. He joined an organization of some sort. What does it have to do with this? I'm getting there. Let's say that one member gets hurt and they need the best medic to cure him. Our dear ex-teammate, who I must admit has still some spies even in our village, can simply come for you and use him as an hostage. And this can be applied to any other hidden village as well. You know that adopting him, effectively making him the sole heir of one of the most famous ninja clan, won't be a silent affair. This wouldn't be a problem if you were inside the village, where you would be safe, but if you're traveling through the elemental countries. I know, but I can't come back, Jiraiya, I just can't." Tsunade said with a sigh, averting her eyes. "But it would be the best thing for him. Do you really want him to grow up like a wanderer without a chance to have a home or friends? He's too young for that kind of life. If you want to adopt him, you should start looking out for his future and let go of the past." Tsunade bit her lip, still not looking at him. She knew he was right, but you can always wait some years before coming back and adopt him officially, or maybe you can take residence in your grandfather's cottage. It's in the forest, so you would be in the village without really seeing it. Now that was a good idea. Who knew that her perverted teammate could think when he wanted to? "You know, I think I'll do it. Just not now, give me some time, Anne." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes catching something she didn't want to see, something that made her release her killing intent. Halfway through their conversation, Naruto decided it was boring and didn't want to listen. Instead, he slid down from Tsunade's lap and stealthily walked behind this Jiraiya person. He had a large scroll he put down when he came into their house, and Naruto also saw a number of papers with some notes and drawings. He took them without alerting him and began looking through them. He didn't read the notes, he couldn't, but the images he had no problem identifying them. They were naked women. His curiosity, however, was stopped a couple of minutes after by a rising killing intent from Tsunade. "Jiraiya, keep that trash away from a child's reach. Hey, it's not my fault. And how the hell did you manage to sneak up on me, kid? Don't swear in front of him, idiot." Tsunade reprimanded, slapping him upside the head. Naruto tilted his head, staring at the man through his goggles while he took back his papers from his grasp. In the haste, however, Jiraiya dropped other papers, this time the ones he used for seals and a couple of those used to check chakra affinities. Naruto reached to pick up one of those, but, as soon as he touched it, it burst into flames. "You moron, what damned things are you carrying around, a fucking child?" Jiraiya's sweat dropped, so much for not swearing. However, his thoughts focused on little Naruto, now safely held in Tsunade's arms, and the ashes that were a paper for chakra affinities. "Tsunade, you haven't taught him to channel his chakra yet, have you?" Of course not, it's not at the top of my list of things I want him to learn eventually. Then he must have a bloodline. There's no other explanation for him manifesting an affinity so strong so early. I mean to have that kind of reaction without even channeling chakra. It's unheard of. Tsunade looked at him oddly before sighing. We had a suspicion. Naru-chan, why don't you show your eyes to your godfather? Don't worry, he won't freak out like that lady we met last week. He seemed to hesitate a second, but eventually he took off his dark goggles, leaving them hanging around his neck, and looked the Toad Sannin straight in eyes. Being somewhat warned by Tsunade's words, he didn't show any kind of surprise at his slitted red eyes and just smiled at him. What about checking your chakra more closely, Gaki? Without waiting for an answer, he get down to work. A couple of minutes later, Jiraiya went through 5 hand seals and the black inky markings he drew before glowed brightly under his palm. The symbols all squirmed and suddenly formed a new shape under his hands. In the end, all that was left was a small circle around which there were kanji that symbolized the 5 elements: lightning, earth, wind, water, and fire. Now kid, this seal essentially works the same way of the paper you touched before. The main difference is that, while that burned too violently for us to see if you have a second affinity, this seal will tell us exactly how your chakra is with regard to every element. Now come here and give me your hand, I'll make you pour some chakra into this. Jiraiya then took his hand and forced the child to release some of his chakra, hitting some pressure points on his arms. A trick Tsunade used on him when they were genin. Well, it is more like she used him as a practice dummy until she got that right, but the point is that after a couple of months spent with a numb arm, he learned the trick too. Jiraiya and Tsunade were staring in disbelief. From Naruto's little hand, which was pressed in the center of the circular seal, 5 black lines extended towards the kanji for their respective elements. What had stunned the 2 Sannin, however, was the meaning of those lines. The 4 that went towards wind, earth, lightning, and water stopped just below their kanji, indicating an affinity for those elements, while the one towards fire went way over its kanji, which started to glow red. Jiraiya, are you sure you haven't messed up? No, I'll be damned, I thought that only a Rinnegan wielder could have an affinity for all the elements. What about the fire? I've never even heard of something like that happening. Tsunade asked worriedly. Neither I did. It must be the strongest affinity ever that has ever existed, if we can call it such. It's probably more like he has control over that element on a level that shouldn't be humanly possible. What do you mean with control over that element? The Toad Sannin assumed a thoughtful expression and took a minute before answering. Well, it's just a theory, but if I'm right. Here's a simple test. Jiraiya stood up and went to rummage through his backpack, closely followed by Tsunade, who was carrying Naruto. Finally he found a match and lit it. Tsunade was starting to think he lost it. What did he need a match for? She was going to voice her thoughts when he took Naruto's hand and put it over the fire. What happened next explained fairly well what Jiraiya meant. Instead of burning the child, the fire caressed his skin, flowing around it like water or wind without harming him. The 2 legendary nin were pulled out of their stupor from Shizune, who re-entered from the door that moment. Tsunade-sama, I'm back. Naru-chan, what are you doing up? What's going on? The blonde medic turned towards her and put the red-eyed child in her arms. Shizune, put him in bed. I must have a word with my soon-to-be deceased teammate. Jiraiya was thinking about the implications of the boy's power and failed to notice his impending doom. What do you meow? He yelled in pain when Tsunade dragged him outside by his ear. Wait a second, Haim, what have I done now? What have you done? What have you done? You say you have a fucking theory and you put a damned lighted match under my son's hand? What would have happened if you were wrong, you useless little waste of space? Unluckily for the white-haired Sannin, Tsunade wasn't just screaming, she was beating him. And Tsunade wasn't known across the elemental countries only for her gambling, her skills as a medic, or her bad temper. She was also known for her freaking inhuman strength. Ouch. Careful. I know, no need to worry, Jiraiya-sama. Shizune answered while treating his wounds. The Toad Sannin had multiple fractures, numerous bruises, and a broken nose that had more or less saved his life. As soon as Tsunade's punch had connected with his face, in fact, the blood coming from it had stopped her from killing him in her righteous motherly fury-induced state. However, before that, she had had all the time to cause enough damage to leave her old teammate bedridden for the next couple of days to a week, according to Shizune's diagnosis. So he was now laying in Naruto's bed while said child, who for the time being would sleep with his unofficial adoptive and very violent and protective mother, was poking him. The worst part was that he was absolutely tactless, but Jiraiya thought better of asking him to stop when a certain blonde-haired monster, hidden under the guise of a beautiful woman's appearance, was watching them from the threshold. Even if it was true that his new godson looked adorable with that curious expression and his head tilted to the side, under his gaze Jiraiya began to feel like some rat lab. On the other hand, if he could bring this little chibi with him at the hot spring, the women would probably throw themselves at him. Jiraiya, stop looking at him like that, you seem Orochimaru. Wah? It's not that. I was just thinking of bringing him with me at the onsen and… Oh crap, no wait. You do have a death wish, don't you little pervert? Tsunade asked with a sweet smile that promised pain like he never had. Luckily Shizune decided to distract her master from killing someone she had just fixed. "Su, you want to adopt our little thief Tsunade-sama. Those were the papers you wanted, MH. Meanwhile the little thief was grabbed by the dark-haired girl who proceeded to take back pills, bandages, a couple of bottles, a needle, some of Jiraiya's papers and the hermit's right sandal. All things that had mysteriously found their way into his pockets. Well, why not? He needs a family and we're already taking care of him. It wouldn't be so much different from how things are now." Tsunade answered without looking at her. Neither Jiraiya nor Shizune could understand why she refused to say out loud how much she loved the little guy. She probably feared that admitting it would have caused her bad luck to strike again. Jiraiya added his 2 cents, and when you'll bring him to the village he can become a great ninja. After all, with his bloodline. What are you talking about, pervert? Who said I'm coming back? How can you be sure he has a bloodline? You said you'll come back, don't you remember? Just before he stole my precious research you agreed to come back and stay in the Shodem's cottage. Shizune turned to look at them. Really? That's wonderful, Tsunade-sama. The legendary medic just mumbled something incomprehensible. And he must have a bloodline limit, it isn't natural to have all the affinities and that thing with fire. Jiraiya continued, probably his eyes are like they are because of that, and his whiskers marks on his cheeks are part of that too. And his talent for stealing. Shizune, is it me or it's the third time you've gotten back that sandal? Shizune stopped with said object in her hand, and indeed it was the third time she has taken that back. She glared slightly at Naruto. You're not stealing this as soon as I put it back in its place, are you? The child grinned widely and nodded happily. Shizune's eyes started to twitch while the other 2 adults snickered. It's like this, MH? You know, this means war. With that said, Shizune began to tickle him, making him roll on the floor laughing. The sound was joyful and pure like a waterfall and caused Tsunade to smile fondly. It was the first time they heard his voice. Shizune, however, was relishing her success in overpowering him. Ah, who's ticklish? Come on, give Shizune Nichan what you've stolen or I'm not letting you go. Jiraiya smiled too at the warm display, another theory forming in his mind. It was a long shot, but it would explain the traits of his bloodline, and why he was alone in the woods. However, he couldn't bring himself to ruin the happy and peaceful moment. He would speak with Tsunade about it later, when Naruto was sleeping. 5 days later Jiraiya had made a full recovery and started packing to go back to his business. He knew better than saying the word research with Tsunade nearby. It was now night and he would leave the next morning at dawn. He had already said Naruto goodbye because the child had gone to bed early. This, however, also meant that he had to tell Tsunade about it now. Tsunade, I was thinking about Naruto's bloodline limit. What about it? Maybe it isn't a bloodline. I know that I said it must be, but there could be another reason, one that would explain his multiple chakra nature, his features, eyes and whiskers marks, and why you found him in forest alone. He paused as if afraid to say what he thought. After a couple of minutes, when it was clear he wasn't going to say anything else on his own, Tsunade decided to push him a little. Come on, let's hear your great intuition. Jiraiya took a deep breath and looked her straight in her eyes. He could be a Jinchuriki. Tsunade seemed worried by his words, but not about her precious child having one of the 9 Biju sealed in him. Her muscles tensed as she eyed her ex-teammate warily. What if he is? Please Tsunade, do you really think so little of me? I am a seal master, and I can see perfectly well that he's just a child. I feel insulted. I thought you knew me better than this. She relaxed. Right, sorry. The only way to know for sure is if you would let me look at him for a seal. This way I can even fix it if it needs to be, or Minato. No. If you find a seal on him you will fix it. And even if there isn't one you're not going to say anything to anyone about him. We agreed that we'll come back to the village when he's 6 to attend the academy, but until then I don't want anyone to know about him. Those old fools on the council putting pressure on me or him are the last thing we need. I understand, but I'm sure that Minato would help you. He doesn't like them too much himself after all. Jiraiya, not a word to anyone. It's either like this or you'll never see nor heard of us ever again. Please, do it for me, it's all I ask. The Toad Sannin realized with horror that she was begging him and her eyes were watering. I've already lost Nawaki and Dan. I lost my Otuto and the man I loved. I can't lose my son too, I just can't. In a rare moment of sensitivity he hugged her without any second purpose. Okay, if it's so important for you I won't say a word. Now let's go to see if there's a seal or not. Just try to not wake him. The next day Jiraiya left. He had made sure to ask Shizune to keep an eye on her blonde sensei to prevent her from going back on her word and not coming back to the village in 3 years' time. He would also try to track them down and visit his godson again some time before then. After all, he had trained the current Hokage, and Naruto had the potential to be another great ninja. And he was a good kid too, somehow he couldn't help but grow fond of him. He knew it wasn't going to be pleasant lying to Minato, but he promised Tsunade, even if it was pointless and stupid. But in the end he was looking forward to seeing the council's faces in 3 years, when they found out about Naruto and his bloodline. Jiraiya smiled, he had never been happier to be wrong than when he saw he didn't have any seals on him. The elemental countries were in turmoil. The rumor that traveled across them was both terrible and wonderful, depending on the point of view. Itachi Uchiha, heir and prodigy of the Uchiha clan, feared for its Dujutsu, the Sharingan, in one night had eliminated his whole clan. The only survivor, besides Itachi himself, was his younger brother, Sasuke Uchiha. The Yondaime Hokage, Konoha's Yellow Flash, was forced to go back to his village from the capital where he had met the Fire Daimyo. It seemed that, in less than 8 hours, he had completed the 3 days' journey from the capital to Konoha. It was a reminder to some of the other countries that, even if they lost one of their most powerful clans, the Leaf Ninjas still shouldn't be underestimated. However, the fact was that Konoha was weakened. That, coupled with an insistent Jiraiya that reminded her of her promise, forced a reluctant Tsunade to pack her things to head back to her birth village. Naruto, now a 6-year-old boy, seemed to be really excited. Personally, Tsunade didn't know what to do with him. It was good to see a change from his lazy and laid-back attitude, but, on the other hand, last time he had been like this was when Jiraiya had the bright idea to give him a sweet with a high content of sugar. All to make him promise not to tell her he had brought him to the onsen. The female's part of the onsen. That day had been hell. He even managed to take Jiraiya's pants, leaving him in his boxers in the middle of the streets without him noticing until a woman slapped him screaming. None of them had been able to figure out how he did that, but they agreed that giving him sugar was taboo. Apart from the sugar rule, Naruto had grown into a fine ninja in training too. It took a lot of patience and time for him to learn chakra control, and he still had the tendency to use loads of it, enough to compensate his lack of control with raw power, but Tsunade wouldn't have that. She did everything in her power and in the end she managed to teach him to control his chakra. As for theoretical knowledge, he proved to be like the sponge he still carried around. The two women knew it was ridiculous, but neither of them could bring themselves to take it away from him. However, Naruto wasn't the only one who had made progress. Tsunade herself made a huge improvement getting rid of her fear of blood. It had happened 2 years previously when a group of missing nin attacked them. After Shizune defeated one of them, his so-called comrades cut off his head, saying he was a weakling. Tsunade had frozen at the bloody display, but then one of the missing nin just had to look at Naruto and say, "Don't worry little boy, I'm sure we won't have to kill you too, someone would certainly buy you." Strangely, even then he wasn't really scared, just worried by his mother's trembling. He didn't know that it was no longer because of the blood, but out of rage. He then looked at her and said his first word, "Mom?" Hearing it melted her heart. It was also that moment her hemophobia disappeared completely and she demonstrated exactly why people didn't mess with one of the Densetsu no Sannin. Smart people at least. The group of 2 women, a pig and a child, were nearing Konoha's main gate. "Naruto," Tsunade suddenly spoke up, Put on your goggles. He did as he was told, hiding his eyes from view. The slug Sanin didn't want people to think he had a dujutsu or to find out of his bloodline limit. Although Konoha didn't despite them like Kiri, quite the contrary, actually, she would not take the chance of the other clans using him for their own benefit, like a tool in their damned political games. Her train of thoughts was interrupted when they reached the gate. Two Chunin were checking people's passes and documents, but she noted that Naruto was staring at a tree nearby. And surely enough, she too spotted the Anbu hidden there. It would have been foolish not to raise the security, given the weakened state of the village after the loss of the entire police force. The police was formed by the Uchiha. She wasn't really surprised that her little boy had seen him. His stealth was probably as good as an Anbu's if not better, and both she and Shizune had noticed that he was always aware of his surroundings. On top of that, his senses were sharper than normal. How much sharper exactly, though, they weren't entirely sure. Tsunade ruffled Naruto's hair, something he still enjoyed every time she did, and spoke just loud enough to be heard by both the Chunin and the Anbu. Naru-chan, I've told you it's rude to stare. Leave that poor Anbu in the tree alone. Shizune slapped her forehead, groaning. Why did Naruto's prankster personality rub off her sensei? The Leaf Nin, however, didn't have time to react when a new voice came from just behind the gate. Tsunade, you've been here for less than a minute and you're already trying to cause problems? I would have expected that from Naruto, not you. Shizune sighed in relief and would have hugged the Toad Sanin if she didn't know what that pervert would try. She really didn't want to be in trouble with the Anbu. Jiraiya-sama, the Chunin, greeted him. The Anbu nodded his head but didn't move from his spot on the tree. Tsunade was a little less formal. Shut up, moron. Are you here to accompany us to the Hokage Tower? Of course, Sensei is there as well, and I wouldn't miss his face when he sees you or our little thief even for my precious research. I'm honored. The sarcasm in Tsunade's replay was missed by the white-haired ninja. You should. Coming here, I've seen some very lovely ladies head for the hot spree. He was sent flying towards the Hokage Tower, courtesy of Tsunade's punch. They proceeded to follow him walking through the village. Tsunade had to seize Naruto by the scruff of the neck to prevent him from running all around the place. She hoped it would be a quick thing. They come, say hi to the old man and Minato, sign the papers to officially adopt Naruto, and then they could go to her grandfather's cottage. No matter what, she still not liked being here. The cottage, even if inside the village, was at least surrounded by the forest, partially isolating it. Meanwhile, the famous Yondaime Hokage was in his office whining to Sarutobi, the old third Hokage. I'm too young to sit behind a desk doing paperwork. I'm sorry, kid, but I was too old to do that. Sarutobi teased, earning a slight glare from his successor which merely caused him to chuckle. The blonde Hokage sighed in resignation. At least we're getting over the Uchiha's loss. Although I must admit I'm worried about young Sasuke's mental health. And even Kakashi was depressed. You know, I think this reminds him of when Obito died. Hopefully Rin will be able to help him. Sarutobi nodded while lighting his pipe, earning a scowl from Minato. However, he didn't have the time to reprimand the older leader when he sensed someone approaching his office at high speed. A couple of seconds later, his sensei came through the window, destroying it in the process. Sarutobi watched this with wide eyes. Now, why didn't that happen when I was doing paperwork? The blonde Hokage ignored him. Sensei, what happened? Are you all right? Damned woman. There was no need to be so violent. Minato looked at him perplexed, while the old Sandame let a nostalgic smile appear on his face. You know, Jiraiya-kun, it's been ages since something like this happened. Last time it was Tsunade-chan's punch that sent you flying through a wall. Of course, said a new voice from the threshold. That idiot asked me if I wanted to have dinner with him at his place, adding that I could stay and spend the night. The Hokage, old and new, turned towards the door to see a young-looking blonde woman there, followed by a dark-haired girl who was holding a little pig. Sarutobi stared at her in disbelief. Tsunade-chan? Is that you? My god, you haven't aged at all. But what are you doing here? I thought you said you would have never come back? I changed my mind. Well, kind of. I'm going to stay in my grandfather's old cottage, that way I won't necessarily have to see this village all that much. While this was going on, Minato was looking the other girl. He was sure he had seen her before. When she noticed this, she smiled at him. Hokage-sama, it's good to see you again. Shizune? Wow, I haven't seen you since we were just kids, trying to find ways to get Jiraiya beaten by Tsunade. Well, it was more like me doing that, and you trying to convince me it was a bad idea. Their conversation was cut short by an angered blonde medic. Damn it you all. Why can't you keep those fucking smut orange books hidden? And Naruto, put down that pipe. It was only then that Minato and Sarutobi noticed a child around 6 years old seated on the Hokage's desk, with the Hokage's hat, Sarutobi's pipe and an orange book whose ownership would definitely be denied by everyone. He had short spiky orange hair and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek. His eyes were hidden by dark goggles and he was wearing black ninja sandals, orange pants, and an orange sleeveless jacket with a black t-shirt underneath and white wristbands. Aside from the fact that both the Hokage were distracted, it was still unbelievable that neither of them had sensed him until now. Sarutobi in particular couldn't grasp the fact that he had his pipe. He had been sure that it must have been in his mouth when he took it. His next 2 words however were an even bigger shock. Hi, Ka-san. Sarutobi's face while Tsunade took a seat and her son went to stay on her lap made Jiraiya's day. When he got a hold on himself he smiled brightly at them. This was certainly unexpected. I'm really happy for you Tsunade-chan. I take it you're back to raise your son in the village? First things first, sensei. I'm here to sign the proper documents to officially adopt him, then yes, he'll grow up as a Konoha ninja. What, more paperwork? The Yondaime asked sadly. Shut up and find those documents brat, didn't that idiot of Jiraiya teach you anything? If you're talking about that, do what a woman says without questions thing, then I'm sorry, never learned that well, he answered with a grin. Are you Kyufu's student? Naruto asked curiously, interrupting the two. Kyufu godfather. N.B.N. Kyufu? Who? Ah, Naruto, now I remember. You named him after sensei's book, right Tsunade-san? Yes, now would you please find those papers? Sure thing, here they are. The blonde Hokage gave her the required documents and while she signed them he decided to remind her of another thing. You do know that, since you're adopting him into one of the major clan of the village, the council will want to meet you too sooner or later, don't you? Sigh yes I know, I actually hoped you could help me with that. I really don't want them trying to manipulate him. Sure, if you want I'll keep my mouth shut. But in the end it won't change anything. They'll see you in a month when he enters the academy. Oh well, for now you can go and settle down. I'm happy you're back in the village Tsunade-san, Shizune-chan. And it was nice to know you Naruto-kun. Tsunade give him a glance over, you know, it seems you're getting on all right with sensei's old job. Yeah, he's the best successor I could have picked. Sarutobi said, he manages to keep everything under control, even after the Uchiha's massacre. The young Hokage groaned, that was my most stressful week. Ever. Really? Tsunade said with an evil smile. A clear sign of Naruto's prankster side rubbing off her. Then as a medic can I suggest you, like I did to Shizune, to MMMPH. She was interrupted by her red-faced student who covered her mouth and dragged her outside, hee. It's been great to see you again Hokage-sama, Sarutobi-sama. Bye-bye. The men watched the strange display with confused expressions. After a minute Minato scratched the back of his neck, I think I missed something. The month before the start of the academy was a peaceful one. Tsunade stayed in the cottage, refusing to step foot in the village for the time being, leaving Shizune with the responsibility of buying groceries and whatever else they needed. Sometimes Naruto would go with her, or just wander through the village. He was happy, for the first time they were in a place where he could go around alone. He liked not only the village but their new house too. It was like being in a forest, surrounded by trees. It was awesome. He looked at the clock and went in the kitchen. Shizune was there cooking breakfast humming quietly to herself. Mornin' Ne-chan. Wa? Ya doin'? Good morning Naruto-kun, I'm making breakfast. Are you nervous for your first day of school? Nope. She chuckled at his antics, it seemed nothing could scare him. Well why don't you go and wake up your mother? After all she must accompany you to school. He nodded and ran into Tsunade's bedroom, then woke up his Ka-san in the way every excited child would. He jumped on the bed screaming. Get up mom, we had to go to school. Okay, I'm up. Ka-san, you're still sleeping. Come on, Shizune-chan said you had to come with me to school. Naruto whined while pulling Tsunade's clothes and sheets. To tell the truth, the blonde Sannin was already awake but she just loved seeing him try to drag her out of her bed. He was so cute pouting like that. There was that, and then there was the fact that she really didn't want to see all the clan heads that were sure to be at school to accompany their children. From what Minato had told Shizune, this year was full of clan heirs. Inuzuka, Akamichi, Nara, Aburame, Yamanaka, even the Hyuga heiress and the last Uchiha. Really, what were the odds? Finally, when it seemed that Naruto was going to lift and turn over the bed, she gave in and got up. After all, if there were so many important families, it wouldn't be right for the heir of the Shoden's clan to be late. After breakfast, Shizune said something about needing to go at the Hokage's tower to see if she could be reinstated as a Konoha's medic nin and work at the hospital, leaving Tsunade alone with her son. Unfortunately, the slug Sanin was still in a bad mood about meeting the clan heads, especially knowing that they'll call her to a council meeting as soon as they'll see her. I swear, if someone with a daughter as much as looks funny at him, I'll make sure it's the last thing they do. I hate politics. They had just left their home when Tsunade had a sudden thought. Naru-chan, you go ahead, I'll catch up later. Don't worry, it's a matter of minutes, okay? Good boy. She ruffled his hair and looked at him running towards the village to go to the academy. Like Nawaki did, she shook her head and left towards the memorial stone. It was time to think about the future, she knew it, but that didn't mean she had to forget the past. Naruto couldn't help but smile while running through the village. There were so many people, so many ninja. He still found it incredible how they all lived together in the same village like a big family and helping each other. And it wasn't just the weak that stuck together to defend themselves, on the contrary, the stronger ones were even more devoted. Like the blonde guy, the Hokage, and the old man with the pipe. It was a bit disorienting, but his mom had explained it: solidarity and love for the village. Putting those thoughts aside, he realized he had reached the academy. It was early, but numerous people were already there. He saw groups of adults speaking among themselves while the other kids were playing or babbling about how strong they were. Naruto fumbled his goggles a little to make sure they were hiding his eyes. He noticed some girls looking at him and whispering, "Oh, hell no. No. Have to find a way to distract them, have to find someone else, there. Dark pretty emo boy who glares at everyone. And that crest must mean he's the last Uchiha. I think. Now, how to make them go after him." Looking around, Naruto saw a brown-haired kid with 2 red marks on his cheeks who carried a white puppy dog on his head. He was boasting about being a great Inuzuka and whatever else. It didn't matter, he was perfect. He made his way towards his group, ignoring a pineapple-haired boy who was sitting under a tree looking at him with a raised eyebrow. Naruto didn't waste time to set his plan in motion. "So you're an Inuzuka? Doesn't seem a big deal. I've heard a Chunin say that the Uchiha would probably be the best of this year. Even if I must admit that he doesn't look like much, it's probably all talk." "Yeah, I've heard his clan was the strongest," said a kid. "That's bullshit, I can wipe the floor with him anytime," added another. Kiba Inuzuka thought about what they were telling and frowned. No way was that dark jerk better than him. He was the alpha, the top dog. Sparing a glance at the dark Uchiha, he could practically feel his arrogance and that air around him that said, "I'm better than anyone else. You're all below me." He didn't even speak to anyone. Gritting his teeth, the young Inuzuka walked towards him, stopping in front of him. The Uchiha glared at him but didn't speak. "What's that face? Are you scared?" Why should I? It's not like you can do anything to me." The cold reply of the dark boy angered Kiba even more. They were making a scene and almost every kid was looking at them. Especially the girls. Naruto smirked, so easy to manipulate. "Oh, really? You think you're better than me, don't you? Well, I'm Inuzuka Kiba and me and Akamaru can beat you with our hands tied." "Do you mean that thing can fight? You bastard. Take that back, no one insults Akamaru and get away with it. Try and make me, I'll show you why the Uchiha are the best." If they were the best, how come they're no more? Kiba didn't need to say anything else. In an instant, Sasuke Uchiha attacked him. Their fight wasn't really all that great, even if it seemed that both of them had some vague form of taijutsu. It was just by sheer luck that none of the teachers or parents were in a position that allowed them to see and stop the fight. At least from Naruto's point of view. The best part was that whatever the outcome would be, afterwards the girls would chase either the emo boy or the wild-looking boy, leaving him in peace. "You know, that was a really clever." Naruto turned to face the pineapple-haired boy who was staring at him earlier. "I'm Shikamaru Nara. Do you play shogi?" "Sometimes. Naruto answered without averting his eyes from the fight. It's more like a brawl. I suppose that they cannot be called ninja yet. Both Kiba and Sasuke had some scratches on them, but in the end Sasuke came out on top, and the girls started forming his fan club. Tsunade reached the academy around 15 minutes after her son. She took a deep breath before stepping in and looking around. She couldn't find Naruto, but that wasn't really a cause of concern. He had always been hard to find. Which was the reason why she didn't object when he chose to wear orange. On the other hand, she recognized numerous clan heads. The Inuzuka in particular seemed upset about something, and glancing at her son she assumed that he just got into a fight. Sighing, she went towards them. Might as well begin with someone tolerable. And with a son. That son was currently being scolded by an angry Sume. What should I do with you? You're lucky there weren't teachers that saw that. You could have been expelled before the actual start of the term. Even her partner, a big dog with only one eye, Kuromaru, seemed to be irritated. However, his sharp senses warned him of a woman approaching them, someone powerful. He let out a soft growl to warn his companion, who turned to see who she was and what she wanted. Sume came face to face with a beautiful young-looking blonde woman who looked strangely familiar. Your son seems a little hurt. I can help you with that if you want? She said that gently, without mocking or lowering her head like those who tried to gain her favor. This gave credit to Kuromaru's claim about her being a very strong kunoichi, and convinced Sume to nod and let her have a look at Kiba. The Inuzuka clan head, however, didn't expect the blonde to activate a medical jutsu without hand seals, healing Kiba in a matter of seconds. That act made something click in her memory, and suddenly she realized just who was in front of her. However, she didn't have time to speak. Mom, what happened? Has Kiba gotten himself in trouble already? A young girl with brown hair tied up in a ponytail reached them, closely followed by 3 dogs. She had a Hite 8, showing that she was a genin. Tsunade wanted to punch something. It was just her luck that the Inuzuka turned out to have a daughter too. Hopefully Sume wasn't someone who would offer her for an arranged marriage. The ones that really worried her were the Hyugas. From what she knew, Hiyashi had 2 daughters, one of which was sure to marry for clan interests, if not both. It's nothing, your brother thought it was a good idea to start fighting with another kid, Sume said, clearly disappointed. Anyway, I want you to meet someone. Hana, Kiba. This is Tsunade-sama, one of the Densetsu no Sanin. Tsunade-sama, these are my son and daughter. Hana bowed with respect and pushed her brother's head to make him do the same when he just looked at her confused. Tsunade waved slightly at them before someone else greeted her. Tsunade-sama, it's a pleasure to see you again in the village. I suppose Jiraiya-sama convinced you to come back. It was the Nara clan head who was speaking with his head bowed. Yes, something like that. You're a Nara, right? Are you taking care of your deer? Their antlers make good medicine. Yes, madam. I suppose you remember my old teammates Inoichi Yamanaka and Shusa Akamichi? Said clan heads greeted her too, followed by Aburame Shibi, who made his way there to see what all the noise was about. And naturally, seeing all the other clan heads, Hiyashi came as well. Tsunade tried to stay calm. Except for the elders and the Hokage, I've managed to attract the entire council. At least the civilians hadn't noticed yet. With that in mind, she tried to make a small talk. May I ask what happened to your son Kiba? He started a fight with the Uchiha. I wonder what he was thinking. I don't know what I've done wrong with him. He just can't control himself, Sume said sternly. Such immaturity shouldn't be tolerated. I mean, no offense Inuzuka-san, but it isn't proper behavior. Tsunade rolled her eyes at the Hyuga declaration. They have always been nobility, decorum, and politics. It seemed that the village hadn't changed one bit in the years that she had been gone. His comment, however, wasn't particularly liked by the Inuzuka. Well, I won't defend his actions, but he's still young, he'll grow out of it. Besides, it wasn't smart on the Uchiha's part to insult his companion. I'm sure Shibi agrees with me that his son would have done the same if young Sasuke were to threaten his bugs. The behavior of the both of them is irrational, the Uchiha for his disrespect and your son for going too far. Tsunade suppressed the urge to kill them all or committing suicide. I hate politics, damn it, why am I stuck here? She looked at the children playing not far from them, searching for Naruto. He would be a perfect excuse to go away from those pompous speeches. Luckily Inoichi decided to change the subject. Evidently he too didn't like the turn things were taking. What do you think, Shikaku? Will young Shikamaru made it through the academy? Last I heard he spent his days cloud watching, asked Inoichi. Tsunade almost chuckled at that. Hee, Nara are as lazy as my Naru-chan. Although he's been more active lately. Must be because he's growing up. I'm not too worried, he's a bright kid. Answered Shikaku. What about your daughter? Are you sure she'll be fine being a kunoichi? Tsunade suppressed the urge to groan. That made the list of clan heads' daughters raise to 4. At least she was fairly sure they wouldn't propose an arranged marriage until the kids were older. Except for Hiyashi, but the Hyuga had always been into those kinds of things. Although the heiress seemed to be a little different. She looked like a shy kind girl who wanted to avoid conflict. If it hadn't been for the Byakugan, Tsunade wouldn't have been able to recognize her as a Hyuga at all. Watching their children, Shusa saw someone who got him curious. Who's that boy with Shikamaru? I don't remember ever seeing him before. Tsunade looked up and found her son. Her attention, however, was still focused on the talking going on in front of her. Hiyashi sneered, if his choice of clothing is anything to go by, I'd say he's from a civilian family. He'll drop out at the ninja program soon enough. I think he's even clutching to a sponge, pathetic. Troublesome, you shouldn't judge him from his appearance. They're still kids after all. Shikaku said, unknowingly gaining 100 points in Tsunade's book. Even if those appearances will get him killed? His clothes are basically screaming, here I am, kill me. Whose clothes? Tsunade had to stifle a laugh. Naruto's timing couldn't have been better. The clan heads had jumped in surprise, none of them having sensed him approaching. Well, it seems that his clothes didn't prevent him to sneak up to a Hyuga, 3 Inuzuka, 5 of their dogs, and 4 other clan heads. He'd probably be able to sneak up on our Anbu even if he wore a fluorescent yellow dress with bells. Oh, how she loved to see their red and embarrassed faces. They'll never live this down. She looked Naruto smiling at her before going to scratch one of the dogs behind the ears. It was one of Hana's and he closed his eyes in content at the boy's touch, but what was strange was that all the dogs seemed to be hesitant around him. Hello Dad, what's going on? Shikamaru had followed his new goggles-wearing friend and found himself with the clan heads and a blonde woman he had never seen before. Ah, Shikamaru, come here. This woman is Tsunade of the legendary 3, she's a very capable kunoichi. Now, who's your new friend? He's Naruto, I thought to invite him later for a game of shogi, if it's not a problem. Naruto, hearing his name, stopped petting the dogs. He spared a glance at Hana, whom he found being much better than the girls currently chasing the Uchiha, and turned to look at Shikaku with a grin. The man shrugged, it's okay for me, but he should ask his parents. I have no problem, my apprentice Shizune will come to pick him later at your house then. The first and faster to react to her words was Naruto, who hugged her while she ruffled his hair. The others took a couple of seconds to understand what she meant, and when they did their eyes widened in shock. Hiyashi paled a bit, thinking about what he had said earlier. He had insulted a Sanin's son in front of her. When word of this reached the Hyuga elders, they'd have his head, especially if they thought to try and arrange a marriage with the last descendant of the Shoden Hokage. Soon after Naruto's meeting with the old people, the teachers called for their new students. The first day of school wasn't all that hard, they basically only explained what they would teach them and encouraged them to be friends and ask questions. Naruto put his concealing goggles to good use and slept most of the time. After all, he already knew everything they were saying, the only interest he had at the moment was in his classmates. The girls were all the same, giggling, whispering among themselves and looking at the boys, especially the Uchiha after the scene earlier. The only one worth notice was a shy girl with white eyes. She seemed to have a dojutsu of some sort, but her confidence was lacking and she appeared weak. The Uchiha himself was a little too arrogant for his own good. He looked like someone who'd get himself killed because he underestimated his enemy. Not that Naruto cared anyways. Among the boys, the only 2 he liked so far were Shikamaru, who was sitting beside him sleeping, and his friend Choji, who offered him some chips. They'd get along just fine. He swallowed and leaned his head on the table and to go back to sleep. When he woke up again, it was because the bell that marked the end of school rang. After their classmates went out, he followed Shikamaru to his house. Once there, they began their play of shogi, and Naruto had to admit that his new friend was quite skilled at strategy. However, he was a master with traps and mind games. Shikaku and his wife couldn't believe their ears when 2 hours later they heard Shikamaru let out a yell of frustration before conceding the game with a smile. Although demoralized that his adversary seemed to read his moves before he could even think them, the young Nara was happy to have a damn good challenge. After all, playing with stronger opponents was the best way to improve, or so they say. It would be his father, however, to be the one to witness just how much trickier the last Senju could be. Tsunade was going to the Hokage Tower, followed by Shizune, who carried Tun while she herself carried Naruto. He simply loved to snuggle against her and human contact in general. She theorized it was an after effect of living isolated for the first 2 years of his life. Not that she complained. Once reached their destination, they found Sarutobi waiting for them. "Sensei," Tsunade greeted him, "you really can't let go of your old job, can you? And what's this about you becoming part of the elders of the council?" He chuckled, "As much as I like to leave the hat to Minato, retirement is utterly boring. And this way I can help him dealing with the rest of the council. We even managed to put the civilian part in their place. It's my sweet revenge for them making stupid demands while I still was Hokage." His old student rolled her eyes. "Yeah, right. Let's just get over with this meeting. Tsunade-chan, if you don't mind, may I ask why you brought him?" "He wanted to come. I had him study a bit about village's laws and he likes mind games." While saying this, both mother and son sported the same mischievous grin. Sarutobi felt a chill ran up his spine. That became soon a sweat drop and a twitch of his eye when Tsunade wordlessly handed him his pipe that she took from Naruto. She had given up trying to understand how the hell he kept grabbing things and instead opted to control him every now and then. It was definitely less tiring. "Naru-chan, don't steal anything while we're in this meeting, okay?" Upon entering the council room, Sarutobi went to his seat around the table while Tsunade took a random free one with Naruto on her lap and Shizune standing behind her. Tun had mysteriously gotten into the child's arms and was now being petted by him. When all the council members quieted down, the fourth Hokage spoke up. "Now that everyone is here, we can start this meeting. The reason we're this evening is to welcome back you, Tsunade Heim, in our village and discuss about you taking possession of your inheritance as the descendant of the Shodem Hokage, as well as offer you a position in this council as both the Senju clan head and one of the legendary Sannin." Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the last point. The old fools had something in mind. Usually an offer from them comes together with a request. Kaharu Utatane, an old woman that was once a teammate of the third, stood up to speak. "Tsunade-san, your grandfather's possessions included your clan's compound, the lands on east of the village with training ground number 15 and a portion of the forest with the cottage in it. On top of that there's a bank account and you have the right to look in the Forbidden Scroll anytime you want." Shizune couldn't suppress the twitch of her eye, "And if I think of all the times we had to flee from our creditors." After that, Homura Mitokado, an old man with round glasses, rose to speak himself. "Now that that is out of the way, let's talk about your future position in this council and as clan head. We are confident that you remember your great-granduncle clan restoration law. As such, your son will have to marry many wives. We wouldn't bring it up so early, but..." He trailed off looking at Hiyashi, who stood up. "Tsunade-sama, I'm speaking for my whole clan when I say that we would be honored to unite our fam." "No thanks," Tsunade interrupted him, raising a hand. "I'm not going to force my son in an arranged marriage, and don't think I have forgotten your comment from this morning." Hiyashi had the decency to look ashamed. "I have no excuse for my disrespect, but with the clan restoration law you may not always have a choice on who he's going to marry." Naruto suddenly spoke up, surprising the council. Didn't that law apply only to bloodline-wielding clans? Shikaku smirked at the boy. He raises a good point. Danzo, the old war hawk, joined the conversation. But one could argue that the Mokutan may have been a bloodline that manifests itself only every so often. In that case, the law still applies here. "No, it doesn't. I'm adopted, so you can't force me to marry anyone, and if you do, it would be against the laws, which state clearly that it would be interference with internal clans' affair, which is punished with expulsion from the council. However, if you want to push the issue, I think that one of this village's traditions is that if a man asks for the hand of one of the major clan's heiresses, he can have it if he beats her father. So all your daughters will have to do is beat my Kasan." Sarutobi and Minato were about to burst out laughing. Shikaku and Sume were smirking. Shibi's eyebrows could be seen on top of his sunglasses, while the other members of the council were completely dumbfounded, and a bit pale, at the thought of such a fight. For her part, Tsunade simply grinned down at him and kissed the top of his head. She then stood up. Well, if this is all, I'd like to go back home. It's late and Naruto has school tomorrow. By your leave. While she was leaving, Minato leaned forward to whisper to Sarutobi, as soon as he's old enough I'm going to make him one of my advisors. This is the first time I've ever seen the council dealt with such mastery. Life in the Hidden Leaf village was peaceful, shaken every now and then by pranks whose instigator had never been caught, but relatively quiet. Of course, the fact that those pranks started when Tsunade and her son came back was just a coincidence. The Yondaime sighed, looking out of the window in his office. He remembered being a prankster himself when he was younger, but painting the Hokage Tower like it was on fire in one night without being seen by the Anbu spoke highly of the mysterious prankster's skills. Someone even suggested leaving the tower like that, as it was actually kind of cool. The Hokage didn't really care. He was just happy that no one had witnessed Naruto's more vicious side when he had made the mistake of listening to Jiraiya-sensei. He blushed slightly at the memory. Flashback. Minato was in Tsunade's house. He had come to give her some documents about the last council meeting, but that had been forgotten as soon as the chair under him had disappeared, making him fall on his butt. He caught a glimpse of a hysterical laughing child before the blonde medic calmly asked him if he had given Naruto something. Yes. Jiraiya-sensei said me to give him a sweet from him and you did it? Damn it, I thought you were smart. Shizune, we have a child on high sugar. Minato looked at her while she was giving him her back and a random thought crossed his mind. When the hell did that little kid make a braid in her hair? The dark-haired girl joined them carrying Tun with her before the pig could fall victim to the now excited kid. She seemed worried and looked right and left. How did it happen? You made him promise not to eat it. This blonde excuse for a Hokage trusted the little pervert and gave him a sweet from him. I'm so gonna make a toad supper tonight. Minato scratched his head. Oh come on, how serious could it be? Shizune glanced at him. Well, if I had to take a guess from what he did to Jiraiya. Then you should keep a hand on your pants, otherwise you'll lose them. Ah, Shizune-chan. You shouldn't say those kinds of things, there's a little kid here. You're a naughty pervert. Naruto chimed in. Minato blushed furiously and looked out of the window. Shizune seemed to have a mental breakdown. She turned a shade of red that seemed radioactive, and was opening and closing her mouth, unable to speak. Tsunade. Well, she was laughing so much she had trouble breathing. However, you probably should have listened to her, Naruto added, adjusting a dark blue scarf around his neck. Wait a second, Minato thought, that isn't a scarf. It looks like my. With a horrified expression he looked down to see his pants were missing. Meanwhile Shizune regained her ability to speak. You little smartass. Come here. He was still a bit out of it when he heard Tsunade snicker. Minato-kun. Are those frogs on your boxers? They were a present, he tried to justify himself. This was quickly become the most embarrassing experience in his life. Flashback ends. The Yondaime shook his head. That day he and Shizune had chased him until 3 hours later he decided that drastic measures were in order and used the Hirioshin to take a hold of him. The fact that Tsunade smirked at him every time they met since then didn't make it any better. He seriously considered making a specific law to forbid anyone to give Naruto anything with sugar in it until he was old enough to control himself. Shizune was working at the hospital. The other medics looked at her as an authority on medicine, but being Tsunade's apprentice had that kind of effect on people. Her sensei herself refused the offer to work there, saying she'd rather stay home with Naruto, but added that if they had cases which really needed her intervention then she'd come. It was left unsaid that should Naruto have even a paper cut she'd come destroying everything in her way. Between her new colleagues she made friend with Rin, one of Minato's old students. And speaking of the blonde Hokage, she remembered the talk she had with her Otuoto about him. Flashback. Shizune had just finished her shift at the hospital and was preparing to leave when the door of the changing room burst open. Turning to look who it was, she saw Rin, who was leading a familiar kid with dark goggles. Here you are, Shizune. See, we found her. Shizune smiled. Naru-chan, what are doing here? Shouldn't you be at school? Sensei dismissed class early, cuz when we came back from practice his desk and the benches were glued to the ceiling. At first he thought it was genjutsu. Shizune's sweat dropped. You wouldn't happen to know how it happened, would you? What? Of course no, Nate-chan. I was doing practice with the rest of the class. Naruto said it with so much innocence, surprise and conviction that Shizune wondered if he should forget being a ninja and try to become an actor. He definitely had talent. Well, what should I do with you now? I had told Minato that I would have lunch with him. Are you dating him, Nei-chan? The question made him sound wary. No, we're just friends. And even I were, it wouldn't be your business. She said the last sentence teasingly pinching his nose. You're my Nei-chan, and it's my duty to make sure you don't end up with a jerk that isn't good enough for you. Shizune promptly ignored Rin's comment about how sweet he was. So you think that Minato-kun, the fourth Hokage, the legendary Yellow Flash, one of the most caring, brave, kind and handsome man in the whole Fire Country. You think that he isn't good enough? Maybe. For now he has to make you happy, because if you hurt her I'll choke you with your legs, Blondie. Hee, got it. Shizune turned towards the door and to her horror Minato was standing there. Oh my god, he heard that. What do I do? What do I do? Flashback ends. After that she and Minato had gone to have lunch together, while Naruto said he would stay with Rin. However, the fact that they talked, enjoyed themselves during lunch, and even that Minato asked her out didn't stop her from trying to make her little brother in a pincushion later. Tsunade was happy. She was happy to be back in her native village, something she didn't think was possible since Dan's death. She even left the cottage every now and then to wander around in town. She looked at her son with a smile. It was unreal how fast and deeply they grew fond of each other. The fact that they didn't share the same blood seemed to make their bond even stronger rather than weakening it. The only one that gave it any importance was Danzo, who decided that Naruto wasn't important because he didn't have the Shoden's blood. This made Tsunade happier, if she thought about what Orochimaru had done in his attempts to recreate her grandfather's Mokuton abilities. She dismissed those thoughts and looked at the three children under a nearby tree. Two were playing shogi while the third was eating a bag of chips. Choji and Shikamaru had become Naruto's best friends, mostly because both the Inuzuka's dogs and the Abarame's bugs were wary of him. Probably they felt the power of his bloodline somehow. As for the Uchiha, Naruto seemed to have an inexplicable dislike for him. It had nothing to do with his arrogance or even the fact that he was the best student. Actually, it was plainly obvious that Naruto held back because he didn't want the other boy to go after him. Then there were the girls. Putting aside the fact that crazy fangirls weren't exactly friendly, he seemed more interested in older girls, like Hana and that one who worked at the ramen stand, Ayame. Girls. Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle when she remembered their meeting with the civilian council. Telling them about how their daughters had to defeat her for her son's hand in marriage had been one of the funniest things ever. Flashback. Tsunade-sama, it's a pleasure to see you again. We wanted to welcome you and your son back. We heard that Hyuga-sama has already made a proposal for his daughter. The female Sannin couldn't bring herself to care about what she used to call the useless and stupid part of the council. Then again, when she was young she called the clan heads and the elders the stupid part of the council. She hated politics, and she had never had the patience or the diplomacy to deal with the old fools. On the other hand, Naruto seemed to like this new game and, if the meeting with the clan heads was anything to go by, he was really good at it too. So she decided to just let him play. Hello, I'm Naruto. You're the civilian council, right? An old merchant answered him, yes, you're right boy. Some years ago the Yondaime Hokage split up the council in two parts to make things easier. But you'll understand that better when you're older. So, now you take care of the internal economy of the village, taxes, and trades. While the elders and the clan heads take care of the military forces and at the same time defend your trades with other countries and provide money to invest from outside sources with their missions. Tsunade toyed with the idea of making him clan head now and letting him go to the council meetings in her place in her mind. You're a very smart kid, Naruto, another man said. Do you plan to be a ninja? Yes? And you said you're 6? What a coincidence, my daughter is your age and will start the academy next month. I'm sure you can be friends. I hope Hyuga-sama won't be senselessly jealous. Why should she? It's not like we're engaged or anything. This surprised the civilians. What? We thought Hiyashi-sama told you about his intentions? Naruto grinned at them. Ah, that. Yeah, he did, but he can't force me, and if he tries my mom will take care of everything. When they looked at her, Tsunade couldn't suppress an evil smile. Right. You don't have to worry about anything, Naru-chan. Mom will make sure that whoever comes won't get to you if she isn't good enough. May we ask what you're talking about, Tsunade-sama? Of course. You see, as the other clan heads already know, anyone who wants to arrange a marriage with my son is free to do so. The only requirement is that his future wife has to beat me in an all-out sparring match. The blonde medic thought she had seen an old lady faint before she turned to go home with little Naruto. Flashback ends. What are you thinking? Shikaku asked. They took turns housing the kids in the afternoon. They were at his house today. Just remembering the faces of the council members when they realized they will have to pass over my body to get to Naruto. Quite literally, she answered with a smile. Right, Inoichi was wondering why he wouldn't want to marry many girls last night. I said him that if I were him I'd do the same. Life is hard enough with just one woman. As soon as he finished speaking, a wooden spoon impacted with his head. Did you say something, honey? Yoshino, Shikaku's wife, asked, glaring at her husband. Nothing, dear. He waited for her to go back in the house before whispering, troublesome woman. Shogi had quickly become one of Naruto's favorite games. He and Shikamaru could be seen playing almost every day, even during class. They just communicated what they were moving and where, the board and pieces in their mind. Today, however, they were out of school and under a tree, where they could use them. Naruto moved a piece and went back to reading his book. It seemed that even Shikamaru could be riled up if you gave him a good reason, like beating him at shogi while reading at the same time. The book in question wasn't one of those orange ones his godfather wrote. The first and last time Jiraiya gave him that as a birthday present, his Ka-san sent him to sleep at Shikamaru's while she had a word with that fucking stupid pervert with a shit brain. He thought he heard some girlish screams for mercy that night. It was one about myths and demons. Since Iruka-sensei mentioned the 9 Biju during class and gave an outline of what Jinchuriki were, Naruto had made it his personal task to find out all the info he could about it. Closing his book, the orange-clad boy looked at the board. After a couple of minutes he met Shikamaru's eyes. A draw? The pineapple-haired boy nodded. At least I haven't lost. So, what about tomorrow? What about it? Naruto asked, tilting his head. You didn't forget it, did you? Tomorrow there's the graduation exam. Do you plan to hold back for it too? Of course, Naruto replied with a frown. We'll leave the title of rookie to Sasuke. His head is big enough for just one thought at a time, and if I were to do better than him he will never leave me in peace no matter what. Single-minded obsessive prick. Choji snickered at his comment and then went to look at the clouds with the other two. The only difference was that he had a bag of chips with him. He was happy that Shikamaru and Naruto were his friends. Both of them were very smart and didn't judge him because of his appearance. And while Shikamaru was a family friend, Naruto appreciated good food. He had never really understood why when he invited him to come with him at that new cake shop and Anbu stopped them though, it did seem to have something to do with sugar. Regardless, Naruto had his moments, like when he entered the classroom crashing through on the window the second day of school. He said the door was boring, then went to sit down and slept the rest of the morning. His explanation was that the lesson was boring too. The day after that, a 12-year-old Naruto went to school wondering how many of his classmates would be able to graduate to become genin. When he arrived he took a seat near Choji, leaned his head on the table and promptly fell asleep. The fact that he always wore his dark goggles had been a blessing the past 6 years. With them on, the teachers weren't able to tell if he had his eyes open or closed, letting him sleep unnoticed. He was jerked awake just before the start of the exam. The first part was a written test to which he answered correctly except for a question that he left blank without even reading it. The second part was a little more interesting, kunai and shuriken throwing accuracy. He hit bull's eyes with all his kunai except the last, which ended up going through a window interrupting another class's lesson. Unintentionally, of course. Finally, the last part was one of the 3 basic ninjutsu, kawarimi, henge, and bunshin, chosen randomly by Iruka-sensei. Naruto had to do 3 bunshin. He managed to do them thanks to his mother teachings about chakra control. Seriously, he was sure that breathing used more chakra than that jutsu, and overloading it would have meant failing the exam. Anyway, he had passed and was now facing the hardest part of the whole ordeal. Do I take the Hite 8 with the black cloth or the one with the red cloth? MMMMMH. He had been standing there for 10 minutes now, and Mizuki seemed to want nothing more than to strangle him while Iruka had a vein pulsing on his forehead. Suddenly the boy had an idea on how to choose. Hey Iruka-sensei, do you fear more seeing blood or being in the darkness? The Chunin blinked at the random question. I think being in the darkness, it can be dangerous if we can't see our enemy. Naruto grinned, thanks. He took the black headband and went out where his mother and Nei-chan were waiting him, leaving behind two very confused teachers. After celebrating, Naruto went out for a walk. He liked walking in the forest at night, it made him feel free and at peace. It took a lot of promises that he would be careful before Tsunade allowed him to wander alone, but in the end he was still inside the village, so he convinced her. Besides, he was a ninja now. Naruto closed his eyes and listened to the nightly sounds of the forest. The crickets, an owl, the wind between the branches, a panting ninja coming his way. Wait, that's not normal. The young genin hastily put up his goggles that were hanging on his neck and went to see who was there and why. Hiding behind a tree, he observed the clearing in front of him. Mizuki was there, panting and holding a big scroll that didn't look like it was his. In fact, it looked like the Forbidden Scroll. How the Chunin managed to steal it, Naruto didn't know, nor did he care. Sneaking behind him, he moved with the usual speed and precision he used to steal things, and took the Forbidden Scroll without him noticing. Naruto, however, wanted to know why Mizuki betrayed the village. Are you going somewhere, sensei? Mizuki spun around and released a sigh of relief when he saw who it was. For a second he feared the Anbu had already caught him. Naruto, you shouldn't be out here this late. I was just doing my patrol around the village. The boy raised an eyebrow. Did he really think he was so stupid? With the Forbidden Scroll on your back? Okay, let me rephrase that. Where had you planned to go after betraying the village, and why did you do it? Mizuki then saw that the orange-clad boy had taken the scroll from him. He cursed, he didn't have time for this, and now he'll have to kill him, making an enemy out of one of the Sannin. However, his master, Orochimaru, was the strongest Sannin, and the last time the great Tsunade had lost someone dear to her, she simply went away to get drunk and gamble away her money, so maybe it wasn't that bad. I'm sorry, brat, you shouldn't have come here tonight. I wonder if your mother will go to drown herself in alcohol again, or she'll just decide to put an end to her life. He was stopped by a hand that grabbed his face. Suddenly he felt himself being smashed through a tree and onto the ground. The hand still hadn't released its hold, and looking up, Mizuki saw that it was Naruto's. The young genin then leaned closer. Shish. Trust me, you really don't want to say that. The tone with which he said that sent chills down Mizuki's spine. And his fear only increased when Naruto took off his dark goggles and stared him in the eyes, their faces only an inch from each other. Glowing red eyes with slits for pupils looked right through him, locking his very soul in an ice-cold grip. Then he spoke again, his voice a barely audible whisper. If you ever mock or insult my mother, I swear I'll make you beg me to kill you before I even start. Is that clear? Mizuki tried to nod, but he couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Even his heart had trouble beating. All he was able to do was looking into those red slitted eyes and feel terror. Then Naruto picked him up for his shirt and punched him. Both of them could hear clearly the snap of several ribs before the Chunin coughed up blood and fell unconscious to the ground. Naruto closed his eyes and took deep breaths. Stay calm, calm down, it wouldn't be good to kill him now, he didn't say anything after all. Now go and clean up this mess. Opening his eyes again, he crouched down on beside the traitor and concentrated. Slowly a red energy covered his right hand. Naruto then touched Mizuki's forehead and murmured, delete. Once he did that, the red-eyed boy took the scroll, opened it and started to read. The first jutsu, the Kage Bunshin, was an interesting technique that basically required only a large amount of chakra to work. Naruto smirked, loads of chakra, mh? Lucky me. Putting the information on that jutsu aside, he gave a look at what else was in there, when he came across something that caught his eye. Well, what do we have here? Shiki Fusion, a sealing technique that summons the Shinigami himself. It seems it's true that no one is invincible. With this it's possible to seal away and eventually kill anything, Naruto thought to himself. Then a smile appeared on his face. But if it's true that nothing is invincible, then even this jutsu has a weakness. The first is obvious, it can be used just once because it claims the user's life. However, there is another. Here it says that the sealer must pull out his enemy's soul, so it can be assumed that, if he's severely injured or weakened and the opponent has a strong will, the soul extraction can be fought and even beaten, making the sealing effectively useless. Naruto continued to study the sealing jutsu until he heard someone approaching. He pulled up his goggles and closed the scroll before standing up to greet whoever was coming. It turned out that they were a couple of Anbus who were looking for Mizuki. Naruto simply handed them the forbidden scroll and pointed at the still unconscious traitor. He badmouthed my mother, so I punched him like she taught me. The two Anbus couldn't help but cringe thinking just how strong his mother punched. If this brat had acquired even half of that strength. Oh crap, my mom. She's gonna kill me, I'm late, very latte. See you around. Naruto left the Anbus with Mizuki and the scroll while he ran home. Then he ran home. The Anbu finished his report. Minato nodded and dismissed him. The security in the village really needed to be improved if a single Chunin could cause all these problems. What puzzled him the most, however, was that he couldn't see Mizuki in the crystal ball, something that Sarutobi said had never happened before. Just when the Anbu opened the door, another kunoichi came in yelling rather loudly. Hokage-sama, nice evening, don't you think? I've come to thank you for sending me that little toy to play with. Hi Anko, how did it go with Mizuki? Has he said anything? The purple head sat on his desk and crossed her legs, letting her coat show her not so much covered body underneath. Minato idly wondered how hard Naruto would punch him if he saw him now. Yeah, the little shit stain told me who he worked for, Anko said seriously, every trace of playfulness gone. Seems the snake bastard was behind this. Do you remember that mission when one of Mizuki's teammates mysteriously died? The blonde Hokage nodded. They had a suspicion that it was Mizuki who killed him but couldn't prove it. Well, that's when that traitorous bastard contacted him. As for what happened tonight, he can't remember what happened, just that he met Tsunade-sama's boy and he punched him. He wet himself when I asked if he insulted the boy's mother, though. The Yondaime hummed to himself. Probably his memory is confused from the hit on his head, but he wet himself because he subconsciously knows that whatever he said caused his situation. Before anything could be added, there was a knock on the door. It was the Junin sensei that would meet their new teams tomorrow, and among them Minato could see his old student Kakashi, the Sandame's son Asuma, and look who's here, Her Majesty the Genjutsu Princess. Anko greeted leaking sarcasm. Mitarashi-san, last I heard you were in the torture and interrogation department. Do you mind explain what are you doing on the Hokage's desk? Asked Kurenai Yuhi with equal bite. It was a widely known fact that the two couldn't stand each other. Kurenai thought that Anko behaved like a whore, and her choice of clothes just confirmed it, and Anko couldn't stand that the pretty princess looked down on her with that air like she was better than her. The fourth, however, wouldn't have them arguing in his office. I'm sorry, but there had been a little incident earlier. If you all could wait a second, we'll begin as soon as Anko finishes her report. Anko smiled triumphantly at that. Once they were alone again, Minato spoke up. Anko, listen. I know that this is your way to cope with what happened with Orochimaru and how the villagers treat you, but you're just making it harder. I know I can't understand what it's like, but you need to open up to people, not scaring them away. And Kurenai doesn't really hold a grudge against you, she treats me like a whore because she's a hypocrite bitch who looks only at the appearances. If that's all, Hokage-sama, I have some work to do. By your leave. Minato sighed. He really wanted to do more for her, but he didn't know how. Well, I'll think of something later. Now it's team assignment time. Iruka was walking out of the Hokage tower with a folder in his hands. He still couldn't believe how Mizuki tried to betray the village, nor would he have imagined that Naruto had it in him to stop him. Although, now that he thought about it, it was to be expected that Tsunade-sama had taught him some things. After all, he performed always almost flawlessly in class, just a couple of points below Sasuke. Always 1 or 2 points below him. Iruka stopped in his track, a sudden thought on his mind. Could it be that he purposely held back? After all, his grades are just too precise. He's always been just behind Sasuke. Even that one time that Sakura managed to perform best in a written test, Naruto ended up making less points than usual to be just behind Sasuke. But why? It doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm just imaging things. He shook his head and looked at the folder in his hand. In that there were his now ex-students' future teams, assuming that they'd pass their Junin sensei's test. Iruka was optimistic though, there were a lot of promising shinobi this year. Well, he thought, I shouldn't make them wait. Haruno Sakura fixed her pink hair and looked in the mirror for the last time. Satisfied with her reflex, she said goodbye to her mother and went out to get to the academy. Today they'll announce the team assignment, and she hoped with all her might to be on Sasuke's team. They'd get to know each other better and then. She blushed furiously and almost walked into a wall. Hey forehead girl, what's up? Can't you even walk straight anymore? Shut up, Ino pig. I was just thinking about how I'll spend my time with Sasuke-kun once we'll be on the same team. Tisk, right, keep dreaming billboard. I'm going to see my Sasuke-kun at the academy now. The blonde then walked ahead, but was soon joined the other who left her a couple of steps behind. From then on they started to run as if the first would have won Sasuke's heart. Their contest ended with the both of them flying through the classroom door at the same time, quickly followed by an argument about how there was a mile between them. Naruto, who was peacefully sleeping in his seat, grumbled something before taking 2 empty bags of chips from Choji, rolled them into 2 pellets, and tried to cover his ears with them. Choji chuckled at him while Shikamaru complained about troublesome women. Just when the 2 girls were about to start a fight, however, Iruka came in shouting to shut up and sit down. Once they did that, he started a speech about how proud he was of them and the life that awaited them as Konoha ninja. As usual, Naruto didn't hear a word, choosing instead to look around the class at the other graduated. Sakura and Ino were glaring at each other, while at the same time stealing glances at Sasuke. They weren't exactly what you can call strong and dependable kunoichi. In fact, they spent almost all their time chasing after the Uchiha instead of training. Like all the girls of their class. The only exception was Hinata Hyuga, but even if she had powerful eyes, her confidence was a major issue. Which was a shame because she seemed to be someone he could have been friends with, if only she had managed to stay conscious long enough to say something more than 2 stuttered syllables. Not far from her were Akamaru and his pet Kiba. No wait, maybe it was the other way around. Looking at them made Naruto remember what he read about the Gobi, the 5-tailed dog. Granted, their power was nothing like the Bijus, but they were doggy too and had a good teamwork. Their problem was that Kiba was brash, loud and arrogant. And speaking of arrogance, Sasuke was without doubt in that category. The prick wouldn't admit he's facing a stronger opponent even if said opponent killed him, and he really behaved like a pathetic drama queen. That aside, however, he had powerful eyes neither him nor anyone else should have. The only one that spoke less than the Uchiha was Shino Aburame, a nice guy in Naruto's eyes, smart and good with his insects, even if he seemed wary since his bugs refused to attach themselves to Naruto. And naturally there were Choji and Shikamaru. While the first was generally kind and had physical strength, the latter was quite clever. And they're my best friends. Naruto couldn't help but smile at the thought. His little evaluation of his class was interrupted by Iruka, who started to announce the various teams. Team 7 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Shino Aburame. The boys unanimously ignored Sakura's happy shout about how true love prevailed anything, while the girls glared at her. Team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Choji Akamichi, and Kiba Inuzuka. Naruto and Shikamaru looked apologetically at Choji, who just smiled at them and shrugged, silently saying that it was all right, even if they weren't on the same team. Team 10 will be Shikamaru Nara, Naruto Senju, and Ino Yamanaka. What? No way. How am I supposed to work with those 2? They're always sleeping, and when by some sort of miracle they're awake, Shikamaru complains and Naruto says weird stuff. Ino yelled out. Weirdness is just a question of points of view, the orange-clad boy muttered. Did you hear him? He's a weirdo. Iruka raised an eyebrow at the blonde girl. Yes, I heard that, and it actually made a lot of sense. It was really deep if you ask me. Thanks sensei. Do you see Ino? That's exactly what I meant. Naruto spoke, grinning like crazy. Oh, he'll enjoy driving the bossy girl insane. Iruka sighed, seeing her become red from anger, and decided to cut their argument short and resumed calling out the other teams. In the end he put the folder that he was reading away and addressed the class for the last time. You can go to have lunch now. Report here in an hour to meet your Junin sensei. Dismissed. Meanwhile, in the Hokage Tower, all the Junin sensei had been watching their future students through the Hokage's crystal ball. The old Sandame was also there, curious about the next generation of leaf ninjas. I had to agree with Blondie, Asuma said, that kid is weird. Although it wouldn't be the first among us. The figure of Kakashi coming in right then, giggling while reading a book, simply confirmed his words. The fact that, just before he closed the door behind him, They could hear a yell about how the flames of youth will eventually defeat his hip attitude reminded them that there was something even worse out there. Well, while I must agree with you that Naruto is rather, the Yondaime paused to search for the right word, original, he's still one of the best students we had this year. He just needs some motivation, like Shikamaru, whose grades however were among the lowest. Asuma looked at the blonde Hokage with a light scowl, and I should be the one to motivate them while at the same time breaking the Yamanaka out of her fangirlism? Minato didn't know if he wanted to smile at how lazy the Junin sounded or if it was for the best to change teams. But it was already too late for the latter, so he simply nodded. However, a sudden thought hit him. With that little monster on the team, Asuma, I don't know how you're planning to test them, but whatever you do, don't use the bell test. Tsunade's son's skills as a thief are unbelievable. The Hokage ignored the curious gazes of the other Junin. It wasn't their business what had been stolen or from who. Anyway, Kakashi, you already knew what your team would be. Just try not to get lost while you go at the academy. The masked Junin smiled sheepishly at his old sensei, Kurenai. You've been given the Hyuga heiress. I assume you remember that our spies had warned us of a possible threat from Cloud because of her bloodline. The Genjutsu mistress nodded. There hadn't been any attempt to kidnap her or her sister so far, which only meant that Kumo was planning their moves carefully. Very well, if none of you have any more questions then you can go. Ino turned out to be better than Naruto initially thought. In fact, she joined him and Shikamaru for lunch. He would have bet that she'd gone chasing her crush. However, her next declaration made him doubt that it was indeed a good thing she hadn't. Now listen, since I'm stuck with you two as teammates, you'll have to change. I refuse to do all the work when you two sleep, so from now on you'll follow my orders, is that clear? Naruto and Shikamaru exchanged glances. After a minute Shikamaru muttered, troublesome woman. Nonetheless, the Nara boy smirked when he recognized a familiar smirk on the other boy's face. An evil smirk. Pasting a foxy grin on his face, Naruto turned towards Ino. What you said was clear, but I'm not going to do it. I didn't know you were so bossy, though. Maybe Sasuke doesn't go out with you, cause he isn't into BDSM. Ino looked at him with a confused expression. What's BDSM? If possible, Naruto's grin became even wider. Oh, just something my Kyufu told me about once. It basically means bondage and is when people use things like chains, handcu. His little speech was interrupted by a very red-faced Ino who tried to kill him. Naruto jumped out of her reach and began to run, closely followed by a murderous girl. He didn't think to have embarrassed her enough however and yelled over his shoulder, Ino, why are you chasing me? I thought you liked Sasuke? The orange-haired boy laughed when she launched a kunai in response. Shikamaru looked at them and smiled. Naruto isn't too troublesome, and Ino will be busy annoying him instead of me. Now all I have to worry about is our sensei. If he isn't a slave driver I can go back to cloud watching. God, I hope he isn't a she. Seeing their time was almost up, the pineapple-haired boy got up and went back to the academy. He knew that Naruto would eventually come too, bringing Ino with him in the process. And indeed, not even a minute after he sat down, his two teammates joined him. What surprised him was that Naruto didn't have a scratch on him. Probably Ino couldn't keep up with him. In fact, despite the fact that his shogi partner was as lazy as him, he was a stamina freak and could outrun almost everyone if he wanted to. Luckily for Naruto, the wait for their sensei wasn't long enough to allow Ino to regain her breath and try again to kill him. The first two Junin to come were a woman with long black hair and red eyes, which caught Naruto's interest, and a bearded man who looked vaguely like a monkey. Team 8, called the female Junin, Training Ground 16, you have 5 minutes. Team 10, spoke up the other, come with me. In Shikamaru's head Chibi Shika was doing the victory dance, displaying much more enthusiasm than the boy himself has ever had. Once they reached their training ground their new sensei addressed them, I'm Sarutobi Asuma, in charge of Team 10 starting today. I'll be strict on you guys, so be prepared. He paused to search for something in his jacket. Damn, where did I put my cigarettes? Why don't you say something about yourselves? You know, to get to know each other better. He added that continuing to rummage in his pockets. You can go first, Goggles Boy. Okay, I'm Naruto Senju, adopted son of Tsunade of the Sannin. I like my family and friends, freedom, sponges and ramen. I dislike whoever insults those I care about. My hobbies are sleeping, doing pranks, and playing shogi. My goals for the future are find certain people and have lots of something. He seemed to think for a second, then he added, Asuma-sensei, my mother is a medic and she'll agree with me that you shouldn't smoke, it can cause hair loss, cancer, breathing trouble, impotence. Asuma froze, then looked at the boy. He had his cigarettes in his hands. Now I know what Hokage-sama meant, but when and how the hell did he steal those? Outwardly he just coughed and pointed towards Shikamaru. Troublesome. I'm Shikamaru Nara. I like cloud watching. I don't like troublesome things. My hobby is playing shogi. I plan to marry a girl who is neither beautiful nor ugly, have kids, and retire to a peaceful life. Asuma's sweat dropped. Oh my god, this kid sounds like zombie. Let's hear what my last student is like. I'm Ino Yamanaka. I like someone. My hobby is arranging flowers and my dream. She chuckled, blushing. The three males just rolled their eyes at her antics. And I dislike Sakura and these two lazy asses. Shikamaru and Naruto looked at each other, shrugged, and said in perfect synchrony, your loss. Troublesome girl. Asuma noted with some satisfaction that his female student had already learned how to release some killing intent, and his other two pupils managed to ignore it quite well. Okay, listen well. I want you to come here tomorrow at 7 a.m. and bring all your gears. We're going to do a test to see if you're good enough to be a genin team. Obviously if you were to fail you'd be sent back into the academy. Ino looked at him with wide eyes. Shikamaru muttered his favorite word, and Naruto, well, Asuma couldn't see his eyes, but judging from his posture and the light snoring. Wake up, kid. Geez, how can you hope to be a ninja if you fall asleep during a briefing? Make one of your teammates tell you what I said. Now go home you three, I'll see you tomorrow. Then with a single hand seal and a poof of smoke he disappeared. The following morning Naruto was sleeping like a log when he fell from the bed. He sleepily looked up from the floor to see that his mother had lifted his bed to make him roll out of it. He sat up rubbing his head and yawning. Was up? Tsunade smiled down at him noticing he was holding a sponge in his hand. Breakfast is ready. You should hurry or you'll end up being late. You have to meet your team, have you not? He yawned again before standing up. Once he was on his feet however Tsunade noted another thing. Naru-chan, where do those boxers come from? Naruto looked at his boxers with frogs. They're Kyufu's gift, he gave me them for my last birthday. Why? The medic nin blinked. Ah. Nothing. Come on, don't waste time. You have a test that awaits you. The red-eyed boy changed and went to eat breakfast. Then, before going out, he strapped his kunai pouch on his right leg and put on his dark goggles. When he was at the door he glanced back and saw Tsunade looking at him with a half smile. He walked back. What's wrong, Ka-san? She shook her head and caught him in a hug. Nothing's wrong. Be careful once you become a ninja, okay? Ka-san, he said hugging her back, you know I'll be alright, it isn't like something can happen to me. The blonde woman chuckled and kissed his head, I know. But it's my duty and my right to worry, no matter what. Now go, you're going to be late. Naruto let go of his mother and ran out waving back at her. 10 minutes later he arrived at the same training ground they were at the day before, just at the same time as Asuma appeared with a shunshin. Very well, you're all on time. Now let's get this over with, shall we? I've hidden 2 marked kunai in the Hokage Tower, your task is to retrieve them. The ninja who work there have been warned of this test, so if they see you they'll act as if you were enemy ninja. Whoever comes back with a kunai will pass, if you're seen you'll automatically fail. Any question? Naruto exchanged a look with Shikamaru. The two then turned towards their sensei, and the orange-clad boy spoke up. Do you really want us to try to do it or can we just give the solution now? Asuma seemed surprised while Ino looked at them in confusion. What do you mean? What solution? Think Ino, Shikamaru said. The Hokage Tower is the most guarded building in the whole village. There is a continuous flow of ninja who go there to have their missions, plus the Anbu that make patrols around it. No one is supposed to be able to sneak in, let alone a genin. Besides, Naruto added, if you stop to think about it, why only 2 kunais when we are 3? It's clearly a trick to divide us. The best plan in a situation like this would be to create a diversion while someone else tries to infiltrate in the building, something that requires not only stealth, but also what this entire test is really about. Teamwork, Shikamaru concluded. Asuma looked at the 2 boys in wonderment. Seems that all their playing shogi has created 2 masterminds. He clapped at them. Congratulations, It seems you're passed and already are officially Team 10. However, since we already set up everything, go and try to retrieve those scrolls. Consider it as our first training exercise." He regretted those words the second he said them, when a foxy grin had appeared on Naruto's face. "I'll provide the distraction." Half an hour later, Team 8, led by Kurenai, was coming back from their training ground after passing their test. The Genjutsu mistress had decided to celebrate inviting her new students for lunch, but as soon as they got in town she could feel that something was wrong. An abnormal number of ninjas were running toward the south gate and many civilians were hurrying to their homes. Making a quick decision, she instructed her genin to go to their respective clan compounds while she herself made her way to the south gate. Once she got there, she immediately felt a faint and strange trace of chakra in the air, something the Junin easily connected to the use of Genjutsu. Before she could do anything, however, an Anbu not too far from her dispelled it, only to have another one being cast just as fast. What caught Kurenai's eye was that said Genjutsu was aimed to affect a large area, and the only ones who actually fell for it were the civilians and those who had definitely no talent whatsoever to dispel them, like some low-level chunin, all of whom started to chirp or bleat and behave like animals. Looking up, she could only sweat drop when an orange-clad, goggles-wearing laughing boy ran using the chaos he created to dodge and hide from Anbu and Junin. Was this how Asuma thought to help the boy? Letting him set up a large-scale prank on the village while he should be tested? Nonetheless, putting aside from his childish behavior, Kurenai couldn't help but be a little jealous that Asuma had gotten someone talented for her field on his team while her own students hadn't even shown interest for Genjutsu. And speaking of her students, "What are you doing here? Didn't I say you to go home?" she asked, looking at them over her shoulder. Hinata flushed lightly and looked down at her question, while Kiba, who obviously had dragged his two teammates there with him, answered, "But sensei, we too are ninja now, we wanted to know what's going on and help." For his part, Choji simply took out a bag of chips and chuckled, saying that he didn't think Naruto would do a prank this big without warning him. Naruto's fun time, however, was cut short a second after when, with a yellow flash, the Yondaime Hokage appeared out of nowhere and grabbed him from his waist. "Well," he said, "what do you think you're doing, Naruto? Isn't this a little overboard for a prank?" The civilians and other ninjas, now free from the Genjutsu, stared at the two of them, some with irritation, others in interest. Naruto scratched his head and looked around. "I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause trouble, but it's necessary for a good distraction. This way my teammates should have been able to retrieve the two marked kunai like Sensei asked us to." As the gathered people seemed to decide that he hadn't done anything unforgivable, Minato put him down, sighing, "I suppose that by now your teammates will have completed their mission. You're with the Yamanaka girl, right? If she has taken control of a ninja who works at the tower, it should have been easy with all the Anbu you have made come here." He gave the boy a glance over and leaned over to add in a whisper, "Thanks for providing me an excuse for leaving my office for a minute." Then with another flash he was gone. As soon as the blonde Hokage left, Choji neared Naruto and offered him a chip. "That must have been your best prank ever, and you even had a perfect valid excuse to do it," the big-boned boy commented. "Thanks. Hey, what are you doing here with your team? Have you already done your test? Did you pass? You're Kurenai-san, right? Nice to meet you. I've heard you're a Genjutsu specialist. Can you suggest me a good book on it?" The young Junin was a bit taken aback when he said all of that without stopping to breathe. While she was saying him a couple of titles, she took notice of her female student who was stealing glances at the orange-clad boy with growing blush on her face. Kurenai knew that Hiashi had tried to have the two engaged, as well as the agreement Naruto stipulated with the council about any arranged marriage. But if she could help Hinata making him choose her, then. Smiling slightly to herself, she and her students left for their celebrating lunch, while Naruto went to meet his other two teammates that had successfully trapped and controlled a Chunin to retrieve the marked kunais. That evening the Junin sensei reported to the Hokage which team passed their test. There was no surprise when Asuma announced the success of his team. Many ninja had already heard of the stunt Tsunade's son had pulled, and the Yamanaka and Nara kids were born for infiltration. Even Team Kurenai wasn't a big shock. After all, it consisted of 3 clan heirs, and the Hyuga girl, even if she wasn't what Hiashi hoped, was still a Hyuga. What people were most curious was Kakashi's verdict on his team. It was no secret that he had failed every single team assigned to him, But this year he got the Aburame boy, who was considered quiet, clever and good at analyzing situations, and the last Uchiha. Some suspected that, even if he failed them, the civilian council may try to ask him to teach young Sasuke anyway. A stupid thing since they had lost all powers in military matters. Such a request would just anger the Hokage and the clan heads. However, nothing of it would happen. In fact, Kakashi announced that, for the first time in his career, his team had passed his test. Apparently Shino said that it was illogical leaving their female teammate to starve. Okay, that was it. I'm sorry it took so long, but I had things to do and a little writer's block. I hated it and refused to have another. I also wasn't too happy with the second half of this chapter, but that's the best I managed to write. If you are interested or want to know why I've made the teams the way they are, here is a very short explanation with various input from some reviews. First of all, I haven't kept the canon teams for two reasons. 1. I'm trying to make this story original, and 2. I've received just one review who wanted the old teams. Now, I've decided to have all the teams with 2 guys and 1 girl, cause at first, when the team are formed, the girls are kind of weak. Let's face it, it's 2 fangirls and 1 who's too insecure. Sasuke Naruto Ino. Too much like canon team 7, if I'm going to change things, let's make big changes.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.